certain things, whether it be healing or psychic ability, probably works at cross purposes to it. But what I think happens is once you begin to practice mindfulness, these things happen of their own. So it's not something that you would pursue, but it's something that as you get into mindfulness practice, the more you do it, the more these things may appear in your life. Okay, so that's mindfulness. That was the second most popular. And then the most popular was the series that I did on New Thought and what New Thought means. New Thought is a movement that began in earnest in the belief system of deism, which came about in the 17th and 18th century, and sort of is encapsulated in a very important book written by Thomas Paine. And that book, of course, is The Age of Reason, being an investigation of true and fabulous theology. And it was written in 1794, or at least the first part was, and it came out in 3 parts. In 1794, 1795, and 18 of a reaction to institutionalized religion and the Bible, and it basically is a belief that God exists, but not to intervene in human affairs. That God exists as an energy, if you will, in many ways, but that the idea is that everything around us is part of God, and that you can look at the world around you and know God just by seeing what happens in the world around you. But now, New Thought moves away from the deistic belief in a way, because deism does not, at least in its traditional form, deism does not advocate for any kind of miracles or any kind of mystical occurrences at all. But in any case, New Thought probably begins in earnest with the work of a gentleman by the name of by the name of Phineas Quimby, and basically the same core beliefs go across the board, and there are many different New Thought organizations that have come up, and the most popular program that we did looked at all of those different forms, because I think people have a confusion. I mean, they've heard the names of things like Christian Science, and while they've heard those, they don't know exactly what they mean. They may confuse it with things like Scientology. There's also the Church of Religious Science, which is not Christian Science. It's very different, but they're considered to be part of New Thought. The only one that really isn't part of New Thought, technically, is Scientology. That's something outside of all of these. But people do sometimes have confusions about that. So in talking about that, I hope that it helped people to have a better understanding of what that means. Also, we talked about the law of attraction and physics, and how that works in New Thought. So the law of attraction has to do with the idea that in physics, what it means is that uh, when you observe something, the very act of observing it uh, influences it. So, in other words, what you think about, what you pay attention to, is what ends up manifesting, if you will. And this is a very real thing in physics. Um, and in physics research, quantum mechanics has shown that the act of observing reality creates it. And attempting to observe something causes it to appear out of nothing. And by the same token, if you are not aware of something, it doesn't exist in your subjective reality. Of healing with the mind. Uh, and that's what Quimby began with, being able to heal through positive thoughts and affirmations. So it is often considered to be a mind healing movement. But it's taken different forms. So in today's times, we still have things like the Christian Science movement, which came under quite a bit of scrutiny and actually a lot of controversy because there were certain Christian scientists who not only felt that you could heal yourself, but also believed that going to a physician of any kind was actually working at cross purposes to your own healing. And so that became controversial as there were children who did not receive medical care that should have because they were, or their parents were, believers in Christian Science. So that became very controversial. But there are other forms of the New Thought movement that I mentioned, and one of them, of course, is besides the Christian Science movement, you have the Science of Mind, which is, or Church of Divine Science, and religious science. So religious science has the idea of, and that was developed by Ernest Holmes in the late 19th century, and it's basically metaphysical idea that has to do with, again, these ideas of how we manifest things in the world and how we can heal ourselves. Unity Church, which I've been a member of in the past and still work with quite a bit, they also have similar thoughts. They tend to work that into a basic Protestant Christian approach. But there are unity churches that don't use Christianity as a base too. So that's very interesting. Unity churches are very independent in that each one that you go to sort of has its own way of doing things. So those are some of the organizations that have grown up around the New Thought movement. And that was the one that most people wanted to hear more about. So I think that we will have more of a discussion on our deism, since that was quite popular, and also we'll talk more about a New Thought and physics and spiritual but not religious beliefs. So these are all things we'll revisit now in 2018. So I look forward to having more discussions. I always look forward to hearing from you. You can contact me at my Facebook page, which is H. Wilkinson Media, and it will bring you right to the Metaphysical Media page where I post these and until next week, have a good